Hello, friends, and welcome back to coverage of the Team Draft Super League. I'm Kenji Numatanami Egashira, joined by Alexander Miracle Hain. And
hello, hi everyone.
Watched Hain put a clinic on with Imminent Doom, which was actually the rare that I opened, so that means it went all the way around back to you. And were you already... Sorry, go ahead.
Oh, it was Imminent, though. I was definitely going to get that one. Nobody else likes that card. I love it.
C-. I actually thought Siggy was going to take it out of the pack that I passed to him, but made it all the way back to you. Were you already red-blue or some their variant of got it?
I actually first picked a white card, but then I was when I took it, I was likely going to be red-blue, where it's best. But it's good in like red-black too. I think you actually can claim to fame back things, which gives you like both the ones and the twos.
Oh yeah. Yeah,
it's
good
fun
stuff. Well, I think Marshall's deck was pretty sweet, but your deck seemed to have just curved and stomped all over him. I think that was probably a bad matchup for him and a really good one for you.
Yeah, his deck seems to be a lot of spot removal spells, but they all cost more than my creatures do, so it's that's not a winning proposition.
Yeah, when his finisher is a 5-mana 2/2, things are going a little bit wrong.
Yeah, I mean, I haven't checked the draft yet, but I'm pretty sure that he got the Sifter Worm, right, that I opened in
Correct.
2, I think.
Yep.
Yeah, he's like, ooh, shiny, or something.
we were hoping he was going to top deck it, but then as soon as you drew the Essence Scatter off that crash through in the very last turn, it was just like, come on.
Yeah, that's why I brought in the Essence Scatter. I was like, pretty sure that's like the only way I think he wins the matchup is he like lands the big worm, and I have no way to answer it. He gets to gain enough life to like swing back.
Right.
So when I drew that, I knew that I basically had it locked up. I didn't think there was anything you could do.
Yeah, I got quickly demolished by Mike Sigrist, over in our game 2-0. I believe deck lists are public now, so I'm going to talk about I'm going to talk about my deck anyways. I've got Double Torment of Scarabs. I don't like that card for the record, but I think it's fine in my deck. I've got a lot of early stabilization board clearing. I got a Bantu's Last Reckoning, so I was hoping to just grind Siggy out, but his deck is mono and eternalize and embalm creatures. So it was just awful for me. Like, he'd sack a creature and then he'd bring it back. He had Vizier of the Anointed, so he's drawing cards in the process. And then in game 2, he slams God Pharaoh's Gift, and so he's just like sacking creatures but bringing them back as 4/4s. And I'm like, okay, this is unwinnable for me.
No, yeah, you have to deal with all his creatures twice. He's got a little bit of a blue splash because like some of his the draft didn't go completely according to plan, but he ended up taking green cards so that Marshall wouldn't get them, and so he was originally planning to be blue-white, but I think he ended up moving into green.
The best part is I have a Scavenger Grounds in my sideboard, so I was able to bring that in for game 2, but unfortunately for me, I never drew it.
Didn't draw it? Yeah.
Oh, just my Hash Up Oasis and my Dunes of the Dead, but good stuff overall. So the next match we have for you guys is going to be between Paul Cheon, who hasn't played yet, so 0-0 currently, versus Mike Sigrist, who we were just talking about, has that Bant Bombs. I think Sam who was doing the pre-intro commentary? It was Sam and... Do you remember?
I'm not sure. Sam and Justin, maybe?
Justin, yep, Justin Cohen. And so they were talking about his Bant Bombs. I didn't see all of his Bant Bombs, but I did nab the Overwhelming Splendor with one of my discard effects in the first game, so I know he's got some nice top-end cards.
Yeah, that's what else I opened in the Sifter Worm pack. It was quite a pack. I took Open Fire out of it, and I think I wheeled the Magmaroth, and and Siggy ended up getting the Splendor. I was pretty happy about that, even if Marshall gets the worm.
It was good. I think this matchup is going to be a lot more interesting, as Siggy does have somewhat of an aggro draw that he can put together. He did have that versus me, but I think his deck is going to be a little bit more wide, so Marshall's going to have time to develop his board, and might see a good one until... What I imagine is going to happen is that Mike lands the Overwhelming Splendor or the God Pharaoh's Gift and then just runs him over.
Yeah, that's what I hope happens.
Yeah. So with this win, if you guys win, I should say, to begin, you will be going to the top 4. Conversely, if Team Limited Resources wins, we'll be going to the top 4.
Right, and be buying a lot of lottery tickets, I imagine. Yeah.
Right, exactly. So the short version is if Team Limited Resources wins today, then it's going to be Limited Resources versus Team Madison next week. And then finally, a few weeks after that, it will be CFB versus PGO. And then on August 29th, the championship match will be between the winners of those two. If Dem Boys wins tomorrow, it will be next week, CFB versus Dem Boys, an off week, Madison versus PGO, and then the championship match between the winner of those two. You guys can see that on the screen there. So a lot riding on the line. We didn't smack talk each other too much during the pregame or on Twitter, but
I mean, like our team was busy playing the Pro Tour, so.
Well, one third of us were playing the Pro Tour at the very least, and one third of us were commenting. I was
really?
happily.
Which third was playing the Pro Tour?
You know, Daddy Cheon was playing the commentary game, which counts for a lot.
Yeah, no, I mean, as Siggy said, I think we expected going in this match that we would do what we do and crush the Magic, and you do what you do and crush the commentary. So.
Fair enough. I guess I should have said 2/3. 2/3 were at the Pro Tour, neither of which were playing, and I was doing as I do, grinding away. But it's all good.
Yeah, I'm still here in Japan, staying at a friend's house, and it's pretty nice. You can see the screen behind me, but I think the other members of Dem Boys are having a little bit of a tougher time with the internet here. So.
Yeah, maybe you want if you want to talk a little bit about your Pro Tour experience. How did it go for you? I think people are interested.
I went 10-6. I started off 2-0. I was like, yeah, this is good. Then lost the finals of the draft. I think on camera to Matt Severa. We had a pretty tight first couple of games. I think I made a misplay in game 1 that threw it away, and then game 3 wasn't really competitive. He crushed me. Mm-hmm. And then it started to go poorly from there. I lost my next 3 rounds of constructed, so I was 2-4 back against the wall. And then I won my next 2 matches to make day 2. Started 2-0 in the next draft before losing the finals of that one to Ari Lax. And then at that point with 5 losses, I was dead for anything meaningful for myself at the Pro Tour.
Sure.
But I still battled through and ended up finishing constructed 4-1 on day 2. I played the same 75 as Paulo because we tested together and the CFP ice and face-to-face conglomerate as we call it.
Right.
So it was even though it didn't go necessarily that well for me, I was pretty happy to see 2 of my teammates battling it out in the finals. Playing the 2 decks that our team had divided on playing. Really, I guess we had some people playing zombies, but we're not going to talk about that.
Sure. No, that's awesome. Well, it looks like the players are ready, so let's go down the match between Paul Cheon and Mike Sigrist. Welcome back to the second round here of the Team Draft Super League. We have Mike Sigrist on Team Dem Boys versus Paul Cheon, Team Limited Resources. I am Kenji Egashira, joined by Alexander Hain. Alex, your team is everyone. Up 2-0.
Yep. And here we get to battle of actually 2 former Team GP teammates of mine. I've teamed with Paul Cheon, had the pleasure to team with him once at a Team Grand Prix. And it was a lot of fun. It was great. We lost to PGO, actually, playing for the top 4 in the last round. It was Paul, Tom Martell, and myself. And, I've also, of course, played like a few Team GPs at this point now with Mike Sigrist, and that's kind of our main squad, Dem Boys. And 3 of us, Siggy, Steve, and I have made, I think we've top it forward 1 Team GP together. And had another reasonable finish.
Awesome.
So it looks like Paul is doing his specialty here, which is white black zombies. If they ain't broke, don't fix it.
I think he's trying to relive his glory days, as he did go 0-2 last team draft. So yeah.
Who and Siggy draws Kenra and Forrest to follow it up, even though he had the Manolith. So we're gonna get some some beats down here. I don't, doesn't. I guess Paul has one zombie, but doesn't have much after that. But I do see a nice little rare in his hand.
Yeah, Archfiend of Ifnir doing a ton of work. Let's take a look at both of these decks, because as you guys can see, Mike has that Resilient Kenra and the Vizier of the Anointed in his hand. He has a ton of Embalm and Eternalized creatures. All right, I see the Resilient Kenra, Steadfast Sentinel, 2 True Heart Duelists, which, remember, you get that in the 3rd pack, so you're not as likely to see that card, especially since it's uncommon, but he has 2 of them. He also has an Unwavering Initiate, so good 5, I think.
Kenji a little bit.
Yeah, good. No, I'm just saying.
2 uncommons, 2, and then only get them in the last pack. I can't believe he had it. Yeah.
Can't believe he did it versus me. He actually played both versus me, but...
the Vizier actually can tutor for them, so you get to kind of draw them more often.
I didn't know that.
The powers that, it's not only Embalm, it's not only, it's both Embalm and Eternalize that you can find. Here, the opposite find an Eternalize, a creature who's not really that strong on the front end. You don't really want to play a 2/3 Vigilance for 4 in your deck. But a 6 mana 4/4 Vigilance that comes from the graveyard and draws you a card, sign me up for that one.
Yeah, and you want to know another combo? Vizier of the Anointed with your God Pharaoh's Gift. That's pretty good, too.
Is it?
That's all I have to say about that. Now, Paul...
it doesn't actually, just for people listening, it doesn't actually draw you cards, I believe.
Oh, no, I'm sorry. I'm saying the Vizier coming from the graveyard, getting God Pharaoh's Gift itself. Yes, because that is what happened.
I just want to be clear what's going on here. All right, so Paul played a zombie, tried to get a little frisky, bluffing maybe a +2/+0 or something. Siggy was not having none of it. It's like, I'm gonna block your fine fellow there. All right.
So that play you were talking about.
Yeah. So we could probably expect from Paul that he probably slams his demon here, but he also has the option of playing Final Reward on the Vizier to maybe try and stop some shenanigans coming. But since there's not actually a creature in the graveyard right now, he's almost certainly just going to slam his big flyer.
Yeah, probably less inclined to do so. No cycling cards in Paul's hand for right now. Now, he did say that we were going to go down 0-4 and then sweep 5-0, so...
That is a bold prediction. So, he doesn't have any cycling cards, however, he does have a discard outlet in play. Yeah, so... That's scary because Siggy has both Unquenching Thirst and Sandblast, so getting damaged by the Archfiend is not really in the cards, but getting some counters on his creatures might happen. And Siggy draws probably maybe his only 1 toughness creature in the deck, but it is a surprise flyer, so get to see that. And Paul actually has some reasonable cards in his hand other than the camel, so he might want to hold on to those other 2 cards. He might just play them instead of using his Archfiend right away. But it is definitely scary if you're sitting in Siggy's seat to think about all those activations. Like Paul, he doesn't know that Paul doesn't have a land, for instance, to start activating. He could activate his Eternal twice, which is -2/-2 permanently to all your creatures. It's not something you really want to see happen in Limited when your opponent has a board full of creatures of their own. So, yeah,
taking a look at Mike's deck, his ways to deal with that Archfiend. Well, you can see one of them in his hand, the Sandblast there. He has 2 copies of that. He also has the Overwhelming Splendor that we were talking about a little bit before the game. Unquenchable Thirst, fine versus the Demon, of course, but doesn't get rid of its triggered ability should that come up.
Yeah, so Siggy here, of course, he's definitely going to attack with his 4/4. The question is, of course, is he going to try and pump it up first? Like, what is his plan to deal with this Archfiend plus discard outlet combo that Paul has assembled? He doesn't, as you said, he doesn't really actually have, besides the Splendor, a very efficient way of dealing with it. If he could kill either half, so if Paul ever starts getting into combat, it's going to be tougher for him, but I think, with knowing decklist, Paul's not really going to start sending in his Archfiend into open mana. So Siggy decides he does want to start getting a little frisky, because by pumping up his Vizier, he actually gets to attack with it as well. I think a lot of players would maybe consider pumping the Vigilance creature, and you get in for 6, but this way he gets in for 8 damage, because Paul is not going to block with any of his power pieces here.
All right, looks like Mike is going to go ahead and use the Unquenchable Thirst on the Archfiend just to prevent it from attacking, as he wants to tap out here. He doesn't want to just keep open Sandblast when Paul does have access to the deck lists, and will probably play around it. Oh, but a Jeru's Resolve, the draw for Paul. Pretty good versus the Archfiend for two reasons. It has cycling, and of course it can untap it.
Yeah, it is it's pretty good. I think he's almost certainly going to save this for a moment to untap it and block, because also it prevents the damage, so it does stop Sandblast. So it's from my perspective, it's a pretty unfortunate draw, but I think Paul's probably relatively happy about it. On the other hand, since he doesn't actually have another land, he might end up cycling it. I think I would not cycle it. I think you have time, especially knowing Siggy's deck list, but Paul does look like he's going to cycle it just to try and put more pressure on.
Yeah, that takes care of some of Siggy's creatures, makes the Sentinel a 2/2, which allows Paul to attack in with a few other creatures if he wants to this turn.
Right. So it looks like, Paul is happy enough to trade his Mummy, and I think he's going to almost certainly exert his and he does get in for a chunk of damage here.
Yeah, this is currently 10 damage if unblocked. The only good trade here for Mike on the Mummy Paramount, as it is a 2/2 as well.
I think that's almost certainly the block he's going to make. Mike will go down to 6 life, which is a little low against the creature with Afflict, but it's better than just kind of chumping your guy away. I think for you take two fewer damage, but
yeah, Merciless Eternal, one of those cards that has too many lines of text on it.
So interesting, Siggy elected to take all the damage.
And why might he do that?
Well, he's planning on racing, it looks like, because he like Paul decided he wanted to cycle, and I was not sure about that because I thought Paul had the better late game in this situation, and by cycling you're trying to close the game out quickly, whereas Siggy realizes, I think, that Paul is advantaged going late because he doesn't actually have an answer for this Archfiend, and he wants to start attacking with his creatures. In this spot, it's Paul. If Paul draws a land, he can -2/-2 everything, but from Siggy can't really beat that basically with what he has, and he is trying to kill Paul before anything can really happen. With that Mighty Leap, it's plus his Desert. It's pretty realistic to be able to get to do that next turn.
Yeah, absolutely.
Paul bricks in the land here.
And Paul drew a Wall of Forgotten Pharaohs, so...
Yeah, it's... walls are often made of bricks. So we've got... So, in Paul's spot, I think it's very likely that he does play something. I think, I would consider certainly playing the Mummy. You do have to be, I guess, aware of Mighty Leap, especially the way Siggy's played, but...
Yeah, this is a force blocked on the Merciless Eternal should Paul opt to attack with it.
Right. But it seems like a creature that you probably don't want to actually get involved in combat here because it's enabling you to have kind of this powerful late game with your Archfiend that otherwise Paul doesn't actually have. If he loses that creature, then suddenly, Siggy gets to play with all of his cards. And I don't like this attack very much from Paul, but the final reward, makes it seem like he can beat certain blocks, but the most obvious block is Siggy has is to double block, I think, here. He could
Which would work out as well for Paul.
Yeah, because single block is actually pretty smart from Siggy because it makes Paul really want to do something, like for instance discard a card. and bring Siggy to 2 life to be dead next turn. And then it opens him up, his mana up, to being able to combo him off with his Mighty Leap plus Desert next turn.
So is there any merit to just blocking with the 4/4 Resilient Kenra? Because then if Paul pumps, your other creature is still lethal with the Oasis and the Mighty Leap.
It is.
Paul is going to cycle. Okay.
Or pump, yeah.
Oh, yeah,
Yeah, the reason, though, is that Siggy doesn't know that Paul doesn't have another land. So
right.
Paul, it's likely doesn't, but... So, wow, it looks like Siggy's going to manage to steal this game with his Mighty Leap. And he's, he played for his outs, basically, which was, like, I think it would, if Paul had just passed the turn and not attacked that turn, holding up the final reward, it would not have been possible for Siggy to win, but instead, death comes from above.
And a Mighty Leap is going to finish off Paul Cheon here in the first game, Mike. Yeah. Maneuvering that game very, very well. Yeah,
I really liked how he played it. There were a couple spots where he could have made up plays that would still probably end up winning, but would have given him slightly less equity. And with the way the draws lined up, he might not have won. And I think Paul made kind of a bit of a judgment call in terms of deciding the question of who's the beatdown, and he decided that he wanted to beat the beatdown, but which, if you look at Siggy's deck, it seems reasonable. Eventually, he's going to land some of his 7 or 8 drop cards. But I think Paul needed to push the brakes a little bit and kind of wait till he drew that 6 land, and he can start killing all of Siggy's board with his little 2-card combo there, and then he can start getting aggressive. Whereas he did it a little too soon and was punished for it.
Yeah, you get these nice scenarios in Magic where you have to decide, put on the brakes, like you said, if you want to be the attacker or the defender in this position. And Paul kind of wavered a little bit, and then he went a little more aggro in the end, which ended up costing him. Although it is just a different line, of course. It worked out for Siggy.
Yeah, it did. So it looks like both players are going to bring in some Gideon's Defeat, which is kind of flavorful. What do you think of those cards in Team Draft? Do you think their evaluations change compared to in regular draft, where in Team Draft you're guaranteed to play against everybody in the opposing team? So there's a good chance you do play against someone who is pulling white. You're almost always going to get to use your sideboard card.
Yeah, I think they probably go a little bit higher. At least if there's a moderate card that you can take for your deck, maybe you're like your 23rd, 24th, you're more inclined to take one of those Planeswalker defeats. All right, here we are for game 2 versus Paul Cheon versus Mike Sigrist. Mike up a game currently, and you guys are leading at 2-0. So if he wins here, that'll catapult you guys to 3-0 versus Team Limited Resources. Feeling good?
Feeling all right. It's still pretty early in the morning.
Oh yeah, what time is it over there?
It's it's 13 hours ahead of where I live in the East Coast. So it's right now we're getting towards noon, and I had to wake up early, leave my hotel and head over here where I am now, and a lot of running in the heat. And so Paul does not yet have a white mana, so his 2-drop, 3 and 3-drop are not going to come on time. He elected to cycle instead of playing his wall, which was a decision I definitely agree with. Mm-hmm. It was really important to just start getting those aggressive creatures into play, especially if he had a desert, then it maybe would be reasonable to play the wall, start pinging, but he didn't, so the wall wasn't actually doing anything. If he draws another swamp, at least he has a 3/1 flyer. Yeah, Mike's got all his colors. He's got an abundance of 2-drops. He's got a counter spell that I encouraged him to play, but I don't think he ultimately did. And it definitely is a card that I like bringing in against a card like Archfiend, which is very difficult for Mike to beat otherwise.
Yep. All right, we'll hope Paul can find a white source here, but he does not. Just another swamp.
Which, is not the worst. It allows him at least to play his 3/1 flyer.
Yeah, pretend to be in the race.
Yeah. Paul has a choice there. Of course, he could hold his creature back and force Siggy to exert to get through. But he's playing the 3/1, so Siggy can exert and he can trade if he wants to in this spot, or if Siggy doesn't want to exert, he can still trade. But of course, the flyer is much better than the ground creature. Generally, in spots where you're mana screwed, you want to prolong the game as long as possible so that you get to draw your out of your mana screw. You can draw your lands. But here Paul's kind of still trading blows with Siggy, which generally will favor Siggy, I think.
Not a bad draw step for Paul there. If he's going to find a card that's not a white source, another 2-drop is not too shabby.
Right. However, it's one that doesn't actually block Siggy's creatures profitably because of their abilities. The wall's a reasonable one. Siggy, of course, elected not to play anything because he was scared of Archfiend. Of course, we know Paul doesn't have it or Fifth Land, so it's pretty far in the future if that card is going to show up. But Siggy doesn't know that, and his hand's pretty solid. His deck's reasonable. Paul didn't have a great draw, so it's not unreasonable to think that maybe he does have the Archfiend on 5.
So what are you thinking if you're Mike here? Do you want to counter this? Because you left it up. I guess Supreme Will has a secondary mode that he might opt to cast end of turn here.
I would definitely, if I was Siggy, if I was going to cast the Supreme Will, I agree with him not casting it. But if I were to cast it, I wouldn't want to trade for one of these 2 ground creatures that don't really do anything.
Right.
Especially like Siggy has all these cards with Impalm and Eternalize, like you mentioned. So he doesn't really mind that much if he discards one of them, for example. And Paul doesn't even have a desert. So the 2/1 doesn't really do anything in the face of like True Heart Duelist, which can block it and the other 2/2, and then comes back and trades with it again. Siggy is scared of Final Reward or Archfiend, or even if Paul draws a Plains and he can counter, he'll almost certainly counter this Angel. But he feels that since Paul didn't play the land, maybe his shields are down for a little bit, and it's time for him to get Siggy with it. But I agree with not playing the Supreme Will there, but if you were to play it, I would try an Impulse, because I think the card you'd get out of that would be higher value than the card you're countering in the spot.
All right, Resilient Kenra, the play for Mike, pumping up into Baronus' Stalwart to a 4/4. He was looking at playing the Cartouche there for a second, but he might be wavering on the counter.
There's the fact that he definitely, if he's going to fight something, he wants to kill the flyer. That's what's really hitting him. That's the card that's relevant. But if he plays the Cartouche first, he doesn't actually get to. He has to exert his creature to be able to survive getting blocked by the 2/1.
Right.
And so that just to get in like the extra damage, I think he's decided that he's going to still play the Cartouche, but he'll play it post combat after no blocks have happened, so that he can kill the flyer and his creature will still untap the following turn, ready to exert the next turn. So altogether, he actually gets in more damage than if he'd exerted this turn.
And I think that's a great point. A lot of people think that if you're going to play a Cartouche, well, I got to do it pre-combat to get the extra point of damage. But this way, the Stalwart, like you said, did not have to exert itself. It could just attack through as a 4/4 into that 0/4 wall.
Right. So Paul draws the best possible card for me, of course, in my team. But it really is quite an act of heroism taking a fall like this. Paul even actually got outside assistance during the draft. The Moto automatically goof grabbed a land for him, pack 1, pick 1. Instead of him accidentally taking some other card that would end up being worse for him.
I believe that was on Paul himself, though. He said he got distracted and he had to run back to his computer and his land was taken.
See, in the meantime, Siggy, I think, lost 2 picks from lag from bad internet or something. So, and of course, those picks probably would have been useful cards. But
phenomenal, I'm sure. Yeah,
but he seems to be doing all right in this spot anyways. Of course, so now this turn he gets to exert, he hits for 4, and puts kind of Paul way against the ropes. Notice that here Paul finally decided that he should slam the brakes and his creature should hold back.
Yeah, unfortunately for Paul, all of his creatures cannot block those Ronus' Stalwarts when they
cannot,
exert.
no. And he finally draws the plains, and is very likely to try and jam his flyer, but it's not going to resolve here.
Fortunately, this is not lethal next turn, because even if the Angel gets, or the Aven gets countered, Paul's only going to fall to 1, and he'll draw his amazing, splendid I Win card.
So something that, of course, that Paul could have considered here is he could have played his Spearmaster. Yeah, just because of... All right, so Paul decides he has enough, despite not actually being dead.
Oh, he was drawing a final reward next turn, too. He was actually going to survive a little bit.
A little bit, yeah. He's like, but what kind of a life is it, right?
All right, so it looks like Mike Sigrist is going to take that match 2-0 over Paul Cheon. That catapults you guys to a nice, comforting 3-0.
So I have to ask you a question, though. Since Paul called that we're gonna start 4-0 and then lose the next 5, like the reverse sweep, does that mean that he took a fall here on purpose? Just to make it happen.
You saw him concede. You saw him concede early. That's all I have to say.
That is true. He also did keep a hand without any white mana. You know, you just never know how things are going to. Yeah.
Got to take your risks versus your final rewards, if you know what I'm saying. All right. Next round, we're gonna have myself versus Steve Rubin. So stay tuned, my friends. We got some quick commercials, but we are gonna have some more Team Draft Super League in just a minute. Oh,
well, actually,
I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have a game still going on apparently. Actually, between Steve Rubin and Marshall Sutcliffe.
Okay.
Yeah.
I guess we could chat a little bit longer, just you and me.
Yeah,
Alex, next up, you'll be playing Paul, so you know his.
Yes, I get to.
His deck list.
His deck looks like some white-black zombies. You know, he's got some scary cards though. So, but I think I've got even more Supreme Wills than Siggy does. So hopefully I can not allow a large Archfiend to resolve.
Yeah, from what I've seen, I think your deck is the strongest out of all the drafted decks this week.
Yeah, I'm pretty happy with my deck, but
I didn't get a chance to look at Steve's deck. Looks like he's on black-red aggro.
Yeah, his deck's fine, but it's nothing too exciting.
Oh, so he got the On-Crop Crasher.
Yeah.
Okay. He got the Earthshaker Kenra. Okay, so he's got some powerful hasters.
He's got some reasonable removal too. You know, his deck's nothing to be embarrassed about. So it should be an interesting match actually. We'll see. You know, maybe Marshall's deck lines up a bit better against Steve's, where his creatures may be a little bit more expensive compared to my deck, where I can play the tempo game much better, like cheap creatures, and then have a couple counter spells backed up. You know, Steve might struggle with some of Marshall's powerful cards.
Yeah, so if we're to believe Paul, Marshall is going to lose this, and then that's when we start sweeping you guys 5-0. But we'll see. I'm not sure what game.
See, I'm on board for the first part for Marshall losing this one. You know, I'm all right.
The 5-0 not so good.
Yeah, the 5-0 is my preferred method. But
all right.
I actually hear that we're good to go to the match right now.
All right, well, let's hop down to the match between Marshall Sutcliffe and Steve Rubin. All right, sorry for that juke out earlier. We do have some more matches being played right now. Steve Rubin on the top versus Marshall Sutcliffe there on the bottom. Steve on Team Dem Boys. Alex, one of your teammates. You guys are up 3-0 currently. And what a hand we have on Marshall's side. Oh, my.
Ooh, yeah, quite a spicy hand, though. He is down a game. We can't see Steve's hand because, you know, being still in Japan, he's having some internet difficulties, not getting to be at home like, you know, the team limited resources.
For one reason or another.
Yeah. So, you know, Marshall could give his creature reach, and then when it triggers, does it get reach again? No, I'm not sure.
I think it says other creatures. Or, no, it just says if you have a creature. So, yeah, it would gain double reach.
Yeah, except I don't think that's a thing. But if he gets to land this Locust God, though, that's he looks like he's maybe going to have some difficulty this turn, but some... Ooh, so Marshall does get to keep that alive.
Right.
But...
And he still gets to hold up an open fire here as well, so things aren't the worst. Now, or rather, Steve has 3 more cards in hand. We can't see him right now. So
Marshall's definitely going to be discarding something. If you're him, I assume you have to discard the hippo. Yeah. The way you're pulling back in this, you slam Locust God, you draw a card, hopefully it's a land, and you slam the Sifter Worm.
Yep.
It's still going to be kind of a bit of a rough spot here for him, but I guess he gets to kill off the
Kenra Scrapper.
Yeah, the Scrapper with his open fire, and then the question is whether he kills off the Death Toucher, or if he just tries to chump block. What would you do in this spot, Kenji?
I think here he's going to, or he should chump the 4/4, as that way he's only going to be taking 1 damage going to 6. That way he can resolve the Locust God next turn. He doesn't have to block the 4/4 with the Locust God, and maybe can get back in the game that way. Whereas if he had just traded away with the Ruin Rat this turn, he would have to, again, if he drew a land here, jam the Locust God and then trade for the 4/4, which is another way for him to get back in the game. But another Kenra Scrapper here from Steve. Well, looks like
Locust God comes down when Locust God is going to have to block, but honestly, that's not that bad. Locust God comes back to his hand, and he just really needs to draw that land for the Sifter Worm.
Nifty-sifty. Yeah, I guess maybe Steve doesn't exert the Kenra Scrapper here. He's not obligated to.
Right, he's not. He could if he has any sort of trick, of course, or if he has a way to do 1 damage. Oh, looks like he's thinking about it, or maybe he's just making sure his computer's not lagging. Yeah, he seems. So obviously the God is going to be trading here, and Marshall's going to go down either to 1 life or to 3 life. Then it's basically on him to draw the Sifter Worm.
Yep.
I think I agree with not exerting here. We don't know Steve's hand, but...
Well, it looks like he has something. Oh, and another Torment of Venom, which is going to force Marshall to discard the Sifter Worm to not die.
Yeah.
Oh, and that's all she wrote.
I don't think Marshall can come back from this. Steve's creature's not going to die, and Marshall's going to lose his only chance, really, of winning the game. So yeah, it looks like the first part of Paul's prediction is coming true. The most likely part.
Flitter Blades off the top, and I'm not sure we've had an 0-5, or rather a 5-0 sweep in the TDSL as of yet. There was that pseudo sweep where somebody in the backgrounds.
I think it was backgrounds won before it could be a 5-0.
Right, exactly.
It was. It was basically going to be 5-1, but it was a question of who won first, and it was, We'll see if we can do 6-0. It feels better, just for you guys. Just you'll be part of history.
And with that, Steve is going to take the match 2-0 over Marshall, which puts Team Dem Boys up 4-0. That means limited resources. Right. Myself and Marshall and Paul are on the ropes. Next up, we have me versus Steve Rubin. Team Limited Resources has to win every single one from here on out, so stay tuned. It's going to be great. We're going to do it. We're going to live Paul's prophecy. Stay tuned, my friends. Don't go anywhere.